Well, good evening, everyone. I wanted to jump on and give my perspective on the economy and some really crucial current events and economic numbers that I found that I know you definitely did not find. Because the prostitute media will not tell you the truth. Well, that's what I'm here for, is to tell the truth on the economy.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to come on and I'm going to give some economic numbers, ones that you're definitely not going to find on CNBC, Fox Business News, the prostitutes at Bloomberg TV, and we'll go over the state of the play of the markets, the economy, jobs, trade, the dollar. So stick and stay, right? So let's get into the markets. The precious metal markets really had a tough time over the past week. And really, what was it caused from? Did we have some economic jolt that showed that the dollar is going to be strong? Was there, something on trade showing that we're exporting so much more now because we're becoming so much more productive? No, that's not what happened. What happened was Trump came out like he always does with trade and stuff like this, and he floated the idea of naming a Fed chairman. And what this did was this gave a lot of optimism to Wall Street, because Wall Street wants, they want more cheap money, right? They're the ones prostituting the most for the big, beautiful bill, right? Because they want another $1 trillion in stimulus for them. They haven't taken enough. And they know if Trump puts their guy into the Federal Reserve, there's going to be all sorts of liquidity flowing in. Well, at least that's the bet. But what's really going to happen in reality is that it's going to drive up inflation. So prices are going to get higher, higher, and higher, especially if you're on a fixed income, or you're at a dead-end job or something like this. Maybe you're in healthcare, maybe you're in a factory working, right? No, they're going to zap your purchasing power with this bill. And if they lower interest rates. Because the problem is not that interest rates are too high, it's that prices are too high. And I could give you an example. And I talk about it all the time. My first home, I had a rate of 17.5%, right? But my first home was a two-family home in New York that was under $100,000, right? So what would you rather have? An interest rate of 17.5% with a rate of 17.5%, or would you rather pay $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 for a house and have a rate of 7%? If anybody could do simple arithmetic, it is obvious you want the latter versus what you got now. But let's talk about the gold market. Gold tonight is at $3,286, and it gave up $80 on the week. Silver held on a lot better. It only gave up 1 cent. It landed at $36.17, which means that my play of telling people to buy silver because that's going to close the 100-to-1 ratio is still in play. As you see, silver held up a lot better than gold. However, this little thing that Trump did, again, these are gimmicks. Once the market figures out that this is all a gimmick, it will reverse and we're going to see precious metals continue to shine. I also wanted to talk about platinum. 6 weeks ago, I was telling my listeners and viewers on YouTube, on X, to go buy platinum. Over the past 6 weeks, platinum has rose, check this out, $351 per ounce, okay, since that broadcast that I made 6 weeks ago. Now it takes $3,151 to buy an ounce of platinum. You scored big time if you bought platinum when I told you to buy platinum. Same thing with silver, same thing with gold. Even with the little $80 pullback, actually, if you're sitting on the sideline and you haven't purchased gold, you're not going to get very many days of $80 drops in gold or $80 losses in gold. I believe we have a support base here in precious metals. And as the Congress passes the big, ugly, beautiful bill, and as Trump signs this behemoth into law, this is only going to put more pressure on the dollar, push up precious metals, and so that's where you need to park your money. So now that we looked at the precious metals market, I want to take a moment and look at the gold and silver miners real quick. So the GDX was under pressure this week as well. It started out at $53.06 and landed at $50.73. The GDXJ started out the week at $68.18 and landed at $65.50. Let's look at Pan American Silver Stock, PAAS, which started out the week at $29.03 and landed at $27.72. Again, all three of these stocks came heavy under pressure this week, not based on any strong economic data, like the dollar building value or, creating all these jobs. This was completely spooked the market based on another, BS thing being floated, by Trump. So what's going to happen is, let's say Trump gets in his lackey to lower rates. Let's say he gets in that lackey. And the guy starts just artificially, think about what I'm telling you. He's going to put somebody in there to artificially lower rates. Well, what that's going to do, that's going to artificially juice the market, which is artificially going to raise prices. That's the opposite of what we need. What we need is to raise rates, stop people from obtaining credit that don't deserve it, stop encouraging businesses to take on more debt, stop encouraging individuals to take on more debt, looking to just preserve your wealth. Then there's a few ways to do that. The best way to make money is to start a business. That's really the best way. But the other way is to invest with stocks that pay good dividends, right? So you want stocks that pay good dividends, or if you're trying to preserve your wealth, you want to park your money in precious metals, things of this nature. Now it's funny because, see, that's the difference with precious metal. See, when I take precious metal, right, and I own it physically, or I have a broker hold it for me, which I have gold and silver also held by brokers. If I have, let's say that we have a run on the bank, right? All of my gold and silver is liquid. I can literally hit a button and sell my gold real fast. Or the gold that I have, I can easily go down and sell it very, very easily and at spot price. So, it's much safer. That's why I try to encourage people. You want to be safe. Ask yourself, are the banks, do you, here's what you got to figure out. Do you trust the bank? A big thing with the crypto community is they don't trust third-party players. And that's their reasoning for really not wanting gold, because, you could buy a Bitcoin, and with Bitcoin, you don't need a third-party holder to hold your Bitcoin, right? But the problem with Bitcoin is that there's no value, right? It's based on, it's based on the greater fool theory, right? Where, if I have a Bitcoin, what I'm trying to do is hold it to sell it to a greater fool. Where gold or silver has an actual function, right? First off, the central banks use it or hold it. Second, it's used in industry, right? So there's a purpose for gold and silver, right? We have it for jewelry, dentistry, aeronautics, computers, cell phones. It's used in electricity. It's used in space. So that's the real difference between, buying precious metals or buying crypto. Now, I was thinking to myself in the shower today, I was saying to myself, I said, I really thought about it. I've been thinking about it the past couple of weeks. Would I rather hold my money in dollars or in Bitcoin? And that was a big thing for me to ponder. And you know what I came to? If I hold my money in dollars, I'm guaranteed to lose money. I'm guaranteed the Federal Reserve is going to inflate it away. But if I hold it in crypto, even crypto, which you know I cannot stand crypto. But if I hold it in crypto, I at least have the opportunity of making some money, right? It's a gamble. I'm going to the crap table and I'm gambling. The reason why Trump wants rates to go down is because all he's trying to do is inject more fiscal and monetary methadone into the economy. And this is the thing. Trump let the cat out of the bag 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, Trump said something that nobody caught on TV. Maybe they caught it, but they didn't say it. I caught it. And I'm going to tell you right now what it was. If the big, beautiful bill doesn't get passed, and basically if taxes go back to pre-Trump era, so that would bring you back to Obama and Bush tax cuts. That's where they would go, right? So we're only talking about reversing the tax receipts back to Obama and Bush. That's where they would go, okay? He said, and I quote, "We will have a massive recession." That's what he said. He said it several times. So basically, what Trump is admitting is that if we don't inject trillions of dollars of artificially inflated money into the economy, then we're going to have a recession. Which means, if you read under the line, that the economy today is much weaker than it was when Obama was president. That's what he's saying. Because we didn't have a recession under Obama. If you remember, the recession happened when Bush was leaving office. And Obama was being sworn in 07 into 08. And then it lasted up until 012. And again, that was under, if everybody knows their economic history, the Bush tax cuts. Trump is admitting that the economy is far weaker. So we need more artificially injected monetary and fiscal methadone in the economy. And if we don't get it, he says we're going to have a recession. Yeah, it is out. And wait till you see the numbers I'm going to share with you in a few moments. But I got to go over some Bitcoin not Bitcoin, but crypto news. You know, on my YouTube, on my X account, a lot of my friends have been recommended me go over some crypto news. So I want to just quickly go over that. And then I'm going to really take a deep dive into the state of affairs of the economy. I do watch the crypto market, and I think people should be educated not only in precious metals, but also in the crypto market and the dollar. So Bitcoin over the past week had a nice pop. And I still can't believe this stuff. Had a nice pop of $5,800. It's hard for me to even say this. Landing at $108,000 for one Bitcoin. Now, my first home was a 2-family home. Was less than a Bitcoin. Okay? Now, I looked at the past 30 days on Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been swinging. So we've hit 108 a couple times. It's been swinging in between 102 and 108,000. So it's been kind of swinging back and forth $6,000 over the past month. Looking at Ethereum is $2,455. It's up $7.51 on the week. Now I wanted to look at its performance over the past month. And over the past month, Ethereum lost 11%, rather $324. So clearly Ethereum had way more pressure on it than Bitcoin. Now, here's one that a lot of my friends talk about. Oh, this is the one that's going to take over the SWIFT and all that. So looking at XRP, another cryptocurrency. It's not a currency, but that's what they call it. It's trading at $2.20. I mean, that's so cheap, I might have to buy that. And over the past week, it gained 1 cent. So I guess if you're buying at $2.20, every penny counts. Looking at the performance over the past month, XRP, the very crypto that the crypto community says is going to take over the entire SWIFT network, lost 11 cents over the past month, or rather 4.8% on the month. And that's your quick look at crypto. Artificially stimulating the economy is not just sending somebody a check. Sometimes it's corporate welfare, right? Sometimes it's personal welfare. Sometimes it's medical welfare, right? Sometimes it's tax relief, right? Sometimes it could be in the form of free child care, free daycare, right? That's all stimulant, right? And so whenever the government creates a program, right, what they're doing is they now are competing with the private sector. So think about it. If you're in the private sector, and let's say you're in healthcare in the private sector, and now the government comes out with a program that directly goes against your program, right? Now you got to compete with unlimited dollars from the federal government. It's impossible. So what happens is the government ends up eating up the private sector. And that's what we see all over the economy, is the government eating up the private sector. So now I want to talk about the dollar real quick. Because again, if everybody remembers, Trump, Harry Lutnick, all of these people on CNBC, Fox Business, they were all saying how, because of Trump's trade policies, that the dollar was going to get stronger, and it's going to be king dollar and all this. Well, tonight, looking at the dollar continues to get hammered. On my last show, the dollar was at 98.04 and has fallen again down to 97.03. It was flirting with 96.60 at its low just yesterday. So there are very heavy pressures on the dollar. And what this does is it results in Americans having to pay more for imported goods, right? Because what happens is, let's say you're competing against the Swiss franc, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and the dollar loses against the Swiss franc. What happens is, when we're trying to buy something from, let's say, China, what happens is China's going to say to us, hey, your dollars are worth a lot less in the open market. You're going to have to cough up more dollars for that same toy, or that same medical device, right? Or that same car part. So that's what's happening. Our dollars are losing purchasing power in the global market against other currencies. And nowhere is that showing up more than in the oil market. The thing about the oil market is that, yes, if you priced oil in gold, right, because I like to tie it to real money, oil has never been this cheap. Yet, when you go to the pump, it's very expensive. But yet, when you hear Trump, or you hear people in the administration, they're like, oh, $2 gas. These people don't even buy gas, right? They're so rich, they don't even buy gas. Everybody knows gas is like, even in South Carolina, where I am, which is fairly cheap, I bought gas yesterday. It was at $2.75 per gallon. And it's been in between $2.60 and $3 per gallon now for the past 9 months. Even before Trump came in office, it's been just sitting, bouncing back and forth 30 cents where I live. And I suspect that's what it's been like throughout the country. And why hasn't the price at the pump gone down? Well, it's the same reason why oil prices in the 70s went up. And the reason for that was because we debased our currency, like we're doing right now again. So foreigners are demanding more money, right? So now here's the thing. Around the world, right, where they have stronger currencies, let's say people who use the Swiss franc, they're paying less for gas overall, right? So, they might pay more because of state taxes or something like that, government taxes. But what they're actually paying compared to us, comparatively, when you do dollar transfers, they're actually paying a lot less than what we are. And the reason for that is because the federal government and the Federal Reserve is still continuing to destroy the dollar. And that's why you have had no relief at the pump. You know, and you know, when I see people posting memes, I mean, they're just complete bullshit. It's like, don't you go to the gas pump and see what you're paying? It's like nobody's being fooled by that. Like, just, you know, tell the truth. But, you know, you should be upset. Even if you're a Trump voter, you should be fucking pissed off at the price of gas still, because it has not moved. You should be pissed off at the price of food. You should be pissed off at the price of houses. You should be pissed off at the price of rent. But you're not. All of a sudden, you know, it's like now we accept it because it's our team in office. See, we got to get out of the team mentality. You know, the one refreshing thing when I went to the No Kings rally in Myrtle Beach, they all agreed that both parties are to blame. They distrust the Democrats as much as the Republicans. And it doesn't matter if you're that new candidate in New York or you're Trump. You need to question and hold their feet to the fire when they do something wrong, right? And that's what pisses me off the most, especially when it comes to the economy. Like, think about it. If Biden came into office and for his first 6 months, you had a stock market that was literally anemic and bleeding and just wavering all around, MAGA would have went fucking ballistic. But instead, they're silent. They don't say nothing. And then Trump puts out this ridiculous, oh, I'm going to name a Fed chairman 11 months early, by the way. He gives an artificial boost to the Dow. You get 0.5% up. And oh my God, it's like the greatest victory. It's like, you know, a D-Day victory of some sort. A D-Day economic victory for 0.5%. I mean, that's the most lamest victory I've ever seen. It's like taking a victory lap, you know, when you've lost a race. Because if you had invested where I was telling you to invest, you'd be up 15, 20% on the year. You know, so, you know, I wouldn't be celebrating 0.5% or even 1% gain, which, by the way, will probably be reversed within the next 10 days anyway. But anyway, so talking about the dollar has fallen now to its lowest levels against the Swiss franc since 2011. Now, remind yourself, everybody out there claiming for such a strong economy, why is the dollar losing against the Swiss franc? And why are we back to 2011 levels? Now, when the dollar falls another 3.5% from here, which is likely before year's end, it will hit an all-time record low against the Swiss franc, which is think about this, that's an 80% drop since Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971. That means we have to shell out 80% more paper, dollars, right, for the same stuff we used to back in 1971. I mean, is that a strong economy? One that has to inflate its currency away? Remember what took down the Roman Empire? What took down the Roman Empire was when the government got too big and when they debased their currency. And that's what we have now. So again, I want to look at the Dow real quick. I'm just going to kind of go over it quick because I kind of went into this a little deep. So the Dow started out the week with a 300-point gain, and that started Trump into his positive territory with the Dow. And that was because of the Israeli-Iran ceasefire. So that was very positive for the Dow. Again, the Dow had that 300-point pop, not because we're producing more or because we're more efficient or because we're producing more products. It's all based on nothing. It's based on enthusiasm. It's based on hype. Then what happened was on Tuesday, the market was flat. Then Wednesday, Trump came out with this announcement floating a Fed chairman, possibly, a new Fed chairman, mind you, 11 months early. That juiced the market another 700 points, landing the Dow tonight at 43,819. What happened was Trump got lucky and had two artificial things happen, right? He had the Israeli-Iran ceasefire, which should have never happened in the first. Let's just get that off the table, right? That shouldn't have happened in the first place. But then we also had this ridiculous, throwing out there, oh, I'm going to name a Fed chairman, and that, got the market all juiced up. Again, not based on anything tangible. I do a lot of posting on X that you don't see on Facebook, x.com/brewmedia, okay? And I thank you. Follow me on there. Again, these are, new channels. And, if you're looking for a free market, capitalist, point of view, a libertarian point of view. Now, I'm a libertarian, but that doesn't mean I won't have Democrats on. It don't mean I won't have MAGA or Republicans on. My goal is to let everyone have a voice. I am not going to silence people just because I disagree with them. If I could, I would interview Trump. I would love to get somebody like Trump and that mayoral candidate in New York in a room together, right? Like, I have no problem allowing people to give their positions. And let me tell you, I'm not going to give a gotcha question. Like, I'm not going to go out there and just, attack people because I can or because it's easy to do. I generally want to give people a space for their opinion. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to have debates. I'm definitely going to have debates. I'm definitely going to challenge people. And I'd like to see regular people, other people debate besides me. Maybe I host a debate, right? But I'm always going to give it straight down the line as I see it, and I'm not going to be phony. I'm going to let people know, even if I disagree with somebody, I'm going to let them know exactly where I stand, right, on my political compass. I don't have to hide from it, right? I don't have to pretend to be something that I'm not. I'm proud of my beliefs, and you should be as well. And so I just wanted to say that. So yeah, if you want that kind of content where I'm not, look, there's nobody buying me. I don't have any corporate sponsors. I don't have any political action network behind me, right? I'm one guy literally volunteering his time to try and get out information to people. That's all I'm doing, and I appreciate everybody who participates in that endeavor. So while everybody was gushing over the stock market finally catching a positive number over the past 6 months of Trump being in office, nobody was looking under the hood at the real employment numbers, jobs, and trade numbers, because the media and admin are not telling you the entire story, right? So if you're on CNN, right, you're getting one, kernel of truth. If you're on Fox Business or Fox, you're getting another kernel of truth, okay? I'm going to blow all them away right now because that's where Bobby Bones comes in. Let's take a moment to look under the hood because our economic engine seems to be continuing to stall out. Yet, in the financial media, the eggheads and the administration are pretending that we have a strong economy when, in fact, I'm going to prove to you we have a weak economy. Here's the deal. We are still, right now, rotating out of full-time manufacturing jobs and into part-time service sector jobs, which means, overall, we are going to have to be forced to buy more foreign-made stuff as we continue to bleed more domestic, productive consumer jobs, and we are also bleeding employees. And I'm going to go over that right now. So let's look at the trade numbers. So since Trump's big, beautiful bill, just last month, the trade deficit grew, check this out, by 11%. Okay? And nobody's talking about it. The U.S. trade deficit in goods surged to $96.6 billion. Okay? Think about that. Literally, in 1 month, we blew $96.6 billion. We blew our expectations away by 6.5%. So even with Trump's erroneous trade tariffs, Americans are being forced to shell out the higher cost of goods. Now, what really happened? So we are importing now more than ever. But all that's happened is we are now handing the federal government hundreds of billions of dollars in new tax revenue for them to waste. And that's the part that I really cannot understand. If you're a conservative or Republican, right? I mean, even if you're like a fiscally conservative Democrat, which I have those in my group, you do not want to give the government more money to waste, right? I mean, especially if you don't support that government. My God. So that's another thing that I can't stand about this whole tariff thing, is that it's not foreigners that pay the tariff, it's us. So the goal of Trump's trade war was to lower the trade deficit, but instead the trade deficit grew by 11%. Now, here's an even more problematic problem. Even more problematic was the decline of American exports by 5.2%. So, not only did we bring in more foreign goods, we are now producing less imported, we are now exporting less goods by 5.2%. So that means not only are Americans paying more money for the same goods made by foreigners, but we are actually exporting less stuff. And it's the very opposite of what the experts like Howard Lutnick at the White House was telling us was going to happen. Now, if you listen to me, I told you that's exactly what was going to happen. And if you look at the trade deficit chart, and go back to 2017 when Trump first launched his tariff wars against China, Mexico, Canada, all throughout the Trump first presidency, he widened the trade deficit. Now it doesn't mean it wasn't widening before that. It just means that his tariffs never worked. And to be fair, under Biden, he widened the trade deficit as well, because Biden also added tariffs on top of what Trump did. You know, so adding tariffs are not, first off, it's not making us more productive. And so it's doing the exact opposite of what Trump and the administration, and quite frankly, a lot of people in the media said that was going to happen. Now, I want to go further under the economic hood because this is really important as well. Check out these, and anybody can look this up. This is what I want you can look up. Check out these horrific numbers from the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics Household Survey. The reason why I look at the household survey is because this is how we get an actual employment rate. So check this out. Now, mind you, the unemployment rate hasn't changed. Okay, it's been staying the same, right? But does that mean we have a strong economy? Well, let's take a look. As we look at the data, I noticed a huge decrease in civilian labor force. Okay, so we lost, check this out, 625,000 people left the labor force just last month. So 625,000 people left the job market last month. Nobody is talking about it, and anybody can look this up. So you ask yourself, wait a minute, if you had over 500,000 people, almost, I mean, you're actually getting close to 650,000. Almost three-quarters of a million people left the labor force, and yet the unemployment rate didn't change? Because that was I said, how could that be? Well, I dug in deeper and I did the work that nobody else is doing on CNBC, Fox Business. So this is a decrease in the labor force, which should raise the unemployment rate substantially. However, the rate didn't change. And that was a puzzling moment for me, because I was assuming that we had the same number of jobs until I found out that we didn't have the same number of jobs. And then it all made sense. So at the same time we lost 625,000 people in the labor force, we also lost 696,000 jobs. Almost exactly the same amount of number, which explains why the unemployment rate never moved. This is another way that the Bureau of Labor Statistics manipulates the numbers to make politicians look better. This is how you can literally hollow out an economy and fake the numbers to the people by just manipulating the numbers. It's still 4.2%, right? But when you look at the numbers, We lost 625,000 people have given up looking for work. That's what that means. Americans gave up looking for work, while at the same time we lost 696,000 jobs. I mean, you know how many jobs that is? I mean, that's like a whole city that's been evaporated, and nobody's talking about it. What this means is we had 625 people. It doesn't matter if they were fired, laid off, retired, right? That's how many people less are working today than were working last month. That's what that means. So we have a smaller labor pool. At the same time, we shed almost 700,000 jobs last month. So we shed over 700, think about what I'm saying, 700,000 jobs, not people. Jobs are gone. We also lost 625,000 people from the labor market, which artificially makes the rate 4.2% stay the same. I hope everybody got that, right? And anybody can look that up. And again, if you're like, oh my God, this is bad for Trump, shut him off. That's the wrong reaction. The reaction should be, oh my God, I need to protect myself. What do I do? Right? That should be the reaction. And the other reaction should be, I am pissed off that my government keeps lying to me and putting out bullshit numbers. That's what you should be mad at. And I don't see the upright. There should be people in the streets pissed off that they're putting out bogus numbers. And let me give you another way that the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out bogus numbers. I'm going to give you another example, because it's not only stuff like this where you could have 600,000 people leave the labor force, shrinking the labor pool, while at the same time shrinking 700,000 jobs, right? And artificially making the number look stronger than it is. But also, how about when they count part-time jobs as full-time, right? So like, I was talking to a woman who has a master's degree, was in financial work, and is working a second job working at the dollar store, just to make a few bucks. And it's a part-time job. And we were talking, and, she was in the financial industry, and she understands this stuff. And I said to her, I says, how do you feel that the government counts your part-time job as a full-time job? And she says it's bullshit. And it is. And that did not start under Trump. And this stuff that you see, that I just pointed out, did not start under Trump. I promise you. This is, again, this is something that I discovered, that I'm sure has been happening for a very long time. So I'm going to keep my eye on this stuff, because now it explains how the government has been able to get away with our cities being hollowed out. Like I said, I driven across the country and read it. I'm talking about Republican-run and Democrat-run states where whole towns have been hollowed out. Okay? And you wonder, how can these guys put out these numbers? And they look so good. But yet, when I walk outside and I go across the country, that's not what I see. And that's because they pull stunts like this. And so, what I'm hoping to do is to wake people up, to start questioning the numbers. Go investigate yourself. Go look up the numbers yourself, right? And don't believe everything you see on CNBC, Fox News, Newsmax, MSNBC, right? And go to alternative media, but question that media and make sure that you're getting the right stuff, because everything I just said, anybody can look up and find out for themselves. And even before I started this show, before I started Brew Media, for years I have been telling people they need to protect themselves, okay? Because we are in a stealth economy. And right now, we are clearly in a stealth recession, right? Does it matter that the stock market is up 0.5% or 1% over 6 months when the trade deficit grows by 11%, does it matter that the stock market is up 1% or 0.5% when you have 625,000 people leaving the labor force? Of course it don't. So even though that the unemployment rate stayed at 4.2%, it was still able to lose 700,000 jobs and keep the rate at 4.2% unemployment, which shows just how bogus these numbers are. And I just want to put this into perspective. So we know that this is not the case, but let's say every single person who left the labor force was a retiree, let's just say. Well, that's not good either, because, when people retire, right, they produce less, right? And now what happens is the government hands them a check. And what happens is when they get that check, they go out into the market and they buy stuff, right? And so people who are retired naturally bids up prices. So Social Security itself is an inflationary program in nature, by its nature. Because what you're doing is you're paying people not to work. Now, if you have a retiree who works maybe a part-time job or maybe opens up a little business, then at least that person is producing something of value, right? While spending their Social Security check. But if you're like my mother, my aunt, who's on Social Security, even though their checks don't pay the bills anymore, they're still bidding up prices because, again, we only have, and this is how you have to understand the economy, we only have a limited supply of goods, right? And so when you have people who didn't add to the supply of goods and they take from the supply of goods, that automatically creates artificial demand, especially when you hand them money, right? And so what happens is that bids up prices. Okay, so even if they were all these people were, let's just say, and we know that they're not, all retirees, that is still terrible for the economy, because now you're taking productive people who were producing stuff, who are now going to become full-time consumers, right? So that's not good. And we're paying them to stay home, which is even worse, right? So again, I'm not advocating to cut anyone's Social Security checks on this program right now. But I guess you kind of get the drift of what I'm trying to say regarding Social Security, and what I think about it, and why it was irresponsible, really, of both parties, not to reform Social Security. That, look, hey, I'm not for Social Security, but at least if you're going to have Social Security, we should at least means test it. So this way, we're not like giving people who have $1 million in assets checks so they can go out golfing and drinking and, subsidizing their kids' inheritance, right? Social Security should go to people who actually need it, right? So, and that's what the program was for, right? You're downtrodden, the poor, not even, it wasn't even for the middle class. It was actually for the lower class. And then as time went on, government kept moving the goalpost, right? And so, I'm all for reforming Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. But again, you're not going to do it with one party. And both parties are being irresponsible, in my opinion, by not coming together and hammering something out. This idea that everybody can go to their corners, and when I'm in power, I'm going to ram through whatever I want. And then when I'm in power, I'm going to ram through whatever I want with only 51% of the vote. Trump won with 49.8% of the vote. That's it. Of the popular vote. That's all he had. 49.8, I'm sorry. He didn't even have 50%. Kamala, she had even less. I think she had 49.4% or it's 2%, something like that. So neither side got above 50%. And thank you, it was us libertarians and people who vote third party that prevented both sides from getting over 50%. And I take great pride in that, by the way. But my point is is that it's your parties that are in power, not mine, Republicans and Democrats. And until both parties understand that what they're doing is actually pissing off the American people on both sides. You know, when I talk to Republicans, they're pissed. When I talk to Democrats, they're pissed, right? And so that's why I tell people, look at your third party candidates. Even if you're not going to look at the Libertarian, go for the Green Party. Go for, somebody else. People say, if you vote Libertarian or the Green Party, you throw your vote away. I call nonsense. You throw your vote away if you keep voting for the same nonsense. And that's what you got. You got more of the same. And it's like I'm cheering just because it's my side, regardless which side is in. That's the problem, is that you said something really important. We need to replace them if they retire with, a new set of employees. And that's true. However, there's not enough people to replace the baby boomers. So that's the first problem. Second problem is the culture that we have. We have a culture of people, and it's not just young. Young people get stepped on a lot. But there's a lot of people who decide not to work for whatever reason. It's our culture. And so until we change the culture and behavior of Americans, right, this trend is going to continue. And look, the government shouldn't be forcing people to work, but at the same time, the government shouldn't be encouraging people to stay home either, right? I like people to make their own choices on their own. I believe everybody in a free market will make the best choice for themselves and their family. And the government should not be in the middle of swaying people either way. Yeah, we need to get more people working. So I want to go over the jobs report, the last job report that came out. So looking at the establishment survey, which is a different survey, the numbers are extremely low. However, they're not negative. So the last report showed that we had an increase of jobs by 139,000 jobs. However, so that's new jobs created. So remember, we lost almost 700,000 jobs, but they're going to show you the 139,000 jobs that were created. Now, however, the prior jobs report was revised down by 95,000 jobs. Now, as I've been stating, every single Trump job report has been revised down. So what would happen is they put out a big number. They get a big pop on the stock market, right? Everybody's celebrating. But then a few weeks later, we get a revised number, and it's always down 50, 60, 70,000 jobs, right? Now, in Biden's administration, the Biden administration, literally the last year he was in office, and this is why Trump won, a big reason why Trump won, was because they were also putting out bad numbers, and then they revised, not only every month of the Biden administration was revised back down, but they found out that Biden actually lost 1 million jobs over that past 1 year or 18 months of the Biden administration. The name of the game is, we are still bleeding jobs. That's my point. So it's not party. We have to take off the blinders, right? We were bleeding jobs under Biden. We were destroying full-time jobs, replacing them with part-time and pretending that they're full-time. We're still doing that. We were bleeding trade deficits. Now they're exploding even more. Okay? So the trend continues, right? So when you look at the stock market, that is just one measure, but it's a very faulty measure to just look at the stock market. So the economy is not strong, and that's why Congress has to pass the big beautiful bill, because the economy needs trillions more stimulation to try and prop up the zombie economy. And if you're not on my X, please go to please go to x.com/brewmedia. If you're not on my X account, I put a lot of neat stuff on there. And my YouTube at youtube.com/brewmedia. But I wanted to go over a conversation that Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene had. I'm going to play this quick clip. It's about 5 or 6 minutes. Please follow along. And at parts of it, I'm going to give my commentary on it. Because it has to do with the economy and certain current events.
It's interesting. You said a second ago that when people are really frustrated when the system they live under fails them, they listen to voices that they shouldn't listen to or wouldn't listen to under any other circumstance. Like, how did Al Sharpton get to be the leader of Black America or whatever? I mean, it's like it's a thing. Mm-hmm. Desperate people tend to go to crappy leaders, I think. And I just can't get over what happened in our biggest city this week, the very same week.
And to be honest, that reminded me of Trump. Not that calling him a crappy leader or anything like that, but that's what happens when people get desperate, right? They will, they will go outside the box, and that's what we're having in New York. We're having people step way outside on the left field, and that's what happens. People get desperate. They look at both parties and they say, hey, you guys have been in charge for the past 150 years. You guys have had the ball our whole lifetime, and our lives are not getting better. They're getting worse. So a guy like Trump gets on the stage, man, he's saying things that nobody else is saying. Bernie Sanders gets on the stage, wow, he's saying things nobody else is saying. And so people end up rushing to their extremes, really on both sides. And that's what we have going on in New York.
Everybody in D.C. is focused thousands of miles away on the greatest threat we face, Iran's nuclear. I want Iran to have the bomb. I'm not pro-Iran, obviously.
We're not pro-Iran.
Yeah.
Like, why do we have to say it?
No, right.
We do.
It's dumb. But at the same time that everybody was looking to Iran, our largest city had a Democratic primary, effectively the mayor's race, and a 32-year-old socialist who wants government-run grocery stores gets like he's going to likely run our biggest city.
Yeah.
In the country.
New York.
And it's like, why did that happen? Is it because people are so desperate for government-run grocery stores, or love socialism, or love foreign-born midwits running their cities? Probably not. Mm-mm. That guy was the only person in the New York City mayor's debate to say he wanted to focus on New York City. All the candidates were asked, if you could visit a foreign country, what would it be? And they, of course, all had an answer. I think most said Israel. Great. And he said, I wouldn't go anywhere. I'd stay in New York. And if I want to meet Jewish constituents, I go to their synagogues, their homes, or whatever. But I'd be here in New York because that's what I'm doing. I'm running New York. That's my job.
Well, he gave the right answer.
I gave the right answer.
And that was Trump's answer. Isn't that amazing that on both sides? Because again, don't forget, make America great again. Even if you don't agree with this, because I know a lot of my friends on the left, they hate that slogan. But, that's how Trump won twice, right? He was saying, hey, look, the Democrats, they're not listening to you. I'm listening to you. I'm going to make America great. They're going to focus on the rest of the world. I'm going to focus at home. That's how Trump won. And now this guy in New York, regardless what you think of this guy, it was brilliant. Because you got to think, he was up against the Cuomo machine. And if anybody's lived in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, anywhere in the tri-state area, the Cuomo machine in New York is basically like the Hillary machine. I mean, that is the head of the snake of the swamp. And this guy beat the Cuomo machine. Because again, while they're all talking about, oh yeah, I would go to Israel and I'd go here and I'd go there. He's like, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay here in New York. And, that's how you win elections, is by talking to the people. Now, do I agree with his policies? Absolutely not. Now we have to try and educate our people so they pick better candidates, right? People who, are going to have better policies. But, this is what happens when people do get desperate and they want to change, and they're tired of, the system and how it is. It's easy to talk people into a government grocery store, right? When they go to the grocery store and they're paying a few dollars for an apple when it used to be a few, 20. I remember getting apples for 5 cents. Okay, who remembers that? What we're talking about, it's like hanging a piece of drywall, right? I remember in New York, you could have bought the drywall, hung it, and spat and taped it for $10 a board, right? You try to do that now. Those days are gone, right? I mean, now it'd probably be around $60, $70 for one sheet, right, to get it all done. And so people are, they're getting crushed at the grocery store. They're getting crushed with their medical bills. And so this is what they do. They're going to turn to the guy who's offering them, hey, I'm going to subsidize your food. I'm going to give you free buses. We're going to tax the whiter part of town and give it to the darker part of town. Those white people have been stealing too much from us. See, you can win that argument when you have an economy like we have. See, that's where they can win the argument on, I'm talking about candidates like the guy in New York. When you have an economy that is hollowed out.
Yeah.
He gave the right answer at least, and he's talking.
Yeah, he's saying, "Look, I'm gonna focus on
I totally oppose
New York."
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it works, but he's talking about economics.
Yep.
And everyone else is talking about foreign policy. Why is it hard to talk
Remember, Bill Clinton, it's economics, stupid, and
about economics?
Economics.
I don't know. Apparently they don't.
And Republicans forfeited economics. I remember I used to turn on Fox Business back when they had John Stossel on. There was a few others that were on there. They would give a free market perspective. They would talk about capitalism, right? And they would talk about how free markets worked and limited government. Now you turn on Fox Business and they're basically, they're no different than CNBC or Bloomberg Television. The only difference between Fox Business and CNBC, Fox Business will put on a salacious, news report that has nothing to do with economics. Matter of fact, when I used to watch Fox Business, it was 24 hours of economics. Now it's like, 10 or 15% talking about the markets, and like the rest of the time is like Trump and, what the Democrats are doing. And, there are no free market capitalists anymore on Fox Business. Now, why is that? Because the Republican Party has given up on these principles. So again, when your party concedes on capitalism and says, no, we give up on capitalism. No, everybody's got to get a check. No, everybody's got to be taken care of. Then the Democrats are way stronger. When you can't defend your own policies, like let's take unemployment. I'm now seeing Democrats pushing for $30 unemployment. $30. I mean, 10 years ago, they were fighting, remember Fight for 15? Now they're up to 30. Why are they up to 30? Because that's how much purchasing power of the dollar that we've lost, right? See, we're not fixing the root of the problem. My grandfather could go out, make a couple of dollars an hour, own a home, own a car in the driveway that was paid off, you didn't have a loan back then. He could raise 5 children on just a couple of dollars an hour, okay? We're not even close to double digits per hour. We're talking just a couple of dollars an hour. And it's because we've debased the economy, right? We've trained people to get paid to stay home, right? That aren't producing anything. Able-bodied people, right? And so we have an economy that is completely flipped upside down. That world is gone, right? And so, and it's a shame because, I believe, and again, that's why it's my belief, us libertarians have the winning argument when it comes to sound money, sound economic principles. I don't want to have to give people more paper, right? So that's how I look at dollars as paper. What I want to do is give people less paper, but they can buy more stuff with it. See, that's the key to prosperity, right? Is savings, not debt, right? I don't want people borrowing, $70, $80, $100,000 to go to school, right? What I'd like is, back when my parents went to school, they could get a college degree and work a part-time job. I mean, how wonderful was that? My grandmother was the first person to graduate with a master's degree. And, she was a nurse and did some other stuff. And, she had no student loans. She paid her way through college. And, again, the more government touches something, the more they destroy it, right? The more it becomes expensive. And again, I know we have the winning argument, but again, there's nobody out there. There's very few people you're going to find like me. They can go out there, make the argument, and stick to landing. See, that's the problem with my Republican friends in office. They preach a good game when the Democrats are in office, but then when they get in office, they fall apart. And they do exactly what the Democrats do, which is spend more money and grow government. People did not have to go into debt for college. And the reason for that was because back then, the government did not back the loans, right? Once the government got into backing these loans, and then what happened was the university said, hey, look at this. We have a whole pot of money here. We could just keep jacking up prices. Anyway, I want to go back to the system that my grandmother had, that we had. I put myself through school. I wasn't saddled with, tons of debt. And so that's the argument that we need to make to get us off the path that we've been on. Let me finish this clip.
I don't know how to fix it. Well, look who he was running against. He's the failed mayor, Andrew Cuomo. Look at him. Governor, yeah. Discussing sexual, all types of accusations.
Yeah.
Oh, give me a break, Marjorie. Trump had the same thing. I mean, that was a ridiculous thing that she said. That obviously didn't bother her, if we're being honest.
So he was seen as the dirty establishment Democrat.
Establishment,
right? Right. That really never solved anyone's problems. They already had him, and they still have the same problems. Right. They're still poor. They can't afford life. They can't afford to move up in the world.
Yep.
Exactly. And so they looked at Andrew Cuomo and was like, why am I going to vote for him? He's not going to make my life better.
No, it's
and so they look at this man who's been in our country for 6 years?
Yeah.
6 years. So he's foreign born. He's a socialist, and he's promising to empty the prisons and do all kinds of crazy things. Yeah. And he's talking to them on their level and talking about the problems they are facing, relating to them with the problems they're facing. So these young people have no choice but to turn to this.
I agree.
I mean, where is the opposition to this in the Republican Party? I see that Curtis Sorwell, or whatever his name is, the guy from oh God, I can't even believe this guy is even running. From the Guardian Angels, I think he's running in the Republican ticket. I mean, that's the best Republican conservative we have in New York. Oh my God. I mean, the Republican Party has completely conceded the state of New York. I mean, you can't win if you don't understand basic economics or basic the troubles that people are going through. And to explain how government destroyed the city of New York, just like Republicans, let's take Los Angeles. How is it that a Republican can't compete in a city where you have the ultra wealthy tripping over the ultra poor in the gutters on their, promenade streets? I mean, you can't compete there? To me, that would be an easy place to compete. I would just show all the trash and garbage and say, hey, I'm going to clean this up. Hey, my policy is going to help bring about fiscal and monetary responsibility back to your neighborhood, right? We're going to clean this mess up. We're going to help get people off of drugs and alcohol and make these people productive again, right? Where are these people? That's it. Silwell. That's it. Yeah, I mean, it's just, and then like he wears that French beret hat and the whole thing, and it's just like, that guy is so, I mean, look, I got nothing against him. I think he's a nice guy. But, even if he wins, is he really going to bring back economic, it's just the whole thing is just complete nonsense in New York. Yeah, it's sad. The Republicans have completely given up on New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, the whole eastern, northeastern, even Virginia. We barely eked out a win for the governor, a Republican for Virginia, for God's sake. I mean, if you can't win it, like Trump lost the state of Virginia in the presidential election. If we can't win the state of Virginia, we're in trouble as conservatives, and I don't count Republicans necessarily as conservatives. Anyway, let me play a little bit more of this.
And it is a failure. It is literally a failure of the Republican Party. I think the Republican Party has completely failed, and it makes me so angry, Tucker. And I can't, I'm not supposed to speak out, right? These young people.
Let's hear that again, what she said, because it's really important. Because I hear this from Democrats and Republicans. So check this out.
Have no choice but to turn to this.
Mike, I agree.
And it is a failure. It is literally a failure of
This is
the
what
Republican
I was saying.
Party. I think the Republican Party has completely failed. And it makes me so angry.
That's Marjorie Taylor Greene saying the Republican Party has failed. I mean, come on, how much more proof do we need? I mean, when you have Marjorie Taylor Greene saying it, I mean, yeah, that's it. You've jumped the shark.
Angry, Tucker. And I can't, I'm not supposed to speak out, right? I'm not supposed to have my own opinion. I'm supposed to just have blind allegiance to my party.
Yeah, Silwell is full of himself. He walks around with his chest out 3 feet. His ego is bigger than the Empire State Building. If I was in New York, I'd probably write myself in, to be honest.
I'm supposed to cheerlead.
It's very sad that there are no candidates that there's no people that can step up in a city like New York, which, by the way, I just want to remind people, New York City, and the reason why 9/11 happened at the World Trade Center was because the World Trade Center was the pinnacle of capitalism and free markets. That's what it was. And that's why they attacked the World Trade Center. Okay, because it was the center of that stuff. And I'm not going to get into the jihadi stuff and all that stuff, or America over there. I'm not going to get into that. But that's why that was a target. And now, New York, which was the number one, was built on capitalism and free markets and limited government, right? My ancestors, and probably many of yours, came in through Ellis Island. And my family didn't ask for anything. We weren't offered anything but freedom. We wanted freedom. And they came here. I always tell the story all the time. My grandfather got a tool belt and a hammer, and he started a business. And he didn't have to get an occupational license and beg the government for insurance or anything, right? He could just start a business. Or my grandmother starting a fruit stand, her and her sister, right? And selling fruit, right? Remember, they used to have vendors and people. They would literally build the carts in their little garages or in the street, right? And people traded with each other. And, it was such a vibrant economy. And you didn't need government to feed these people. You didn't need government to dole out stuff. It was so cheap to see a doctor. And so, if somebody would make the right argument, they could win. Think about, the subway system in New York. This guy's talking about giving away free buses. When the New York City subway was created by the private sector, it was actually private sector industrial revolutionary investors that made the whole system up there, the whole Northeast. And The system was very cheap. It was very efficient. It was clean. Okay, you didn't have garbage and bums and pee, and you wouldn't get mugged, right? Well, what happened was, just like we're seeing right now with the bus offer by this mayor, the government came in and they said, hey, look, you know what? We think that the train system is charging too much to take the train, the private sector. Those evil private sector people are charging too much. So what we're going to do is we're going to confiscate. They literally took those train systems out of the hands of the private sector. They basically nationalized it within the state. And then, you know what they did? They jacked up prices. So the very thing the government said that they wouldn't do to the subway, they actually made much worse. And what happened? Over time, under government control, we've actually lost subway paths. We've lost L trains that have, become overrun, that haven't been updated, right? You can't even put a train on them anymore, right? They're decrepit, right? Now you go in the subway, you got pee, poop, people are mugging you, getting thrown in front of the train, okay? Now, you tell me what system was better. The system when it was in the private sector, where they were growing and it was clean and they made sure that you were given a decent ride for a few cents? Or now, where you're paying all this money, you don't know if you're going to get jacked or what you're going to step in on the way to work, right? So, again, if you had a good candidate that could define the difference between the private sector and the public and why you don't want it in the hands of the public, we could win. But again, you're not going to win with a Sleewell, or whatever his name is. We have to remember that back then too, they were simpler people. They were, happy with less. They were happy to save a few pennies. They were happy to have heat, to have electricity. To be able to have a business. To be able to go get a job in a factory. They were happy to go to school and to have a quality of life that they couldn't have, back in Europe, or even in Asia. A lot of times people think that people only came from Europe, but a lot of Asians came to America as well back then. And again, they came here for the same reasons that the Europeans came, and so, I'd like to instill some of that entrepreneurial spirit back into the American psyche, right? To get young people motivated, to get, hey, if you want to come to this country, that's great. Let's produce something, right? Let's start a job and hire some Americans and, get out there and, produce something. That's the spirit that we need to bring back to the American spirit. And fine, look, we can help the sick and the poor. There's nothing wrong with that. But where the problem lies is when you start taking care of people who can really take care of themselves. And that's really on all spectrums. I really want to stop funding people. Like, for instance, I'll give you an easy one. I don't want to give corporate welfare to Elon Musk. Whether if you like him or dislike him, doesn't matter. I'm sorry, the richest man in the world doesn't deserve corporate welfare. Doctor's Holmes, until she was employed by a phone company in downtown Manhattan, I'd grown up a lonely life as a child. My parents were never home. They were always working. I forgot to mention my dad went to night school and learned English language. That's great. Your parents had to sacrifice their time from their kid to go to work, right? But that was to obviously provide you a better life. They obviously loved you very much. I don't know if any of them are still alive, but, think about your mom's job, okay? Today, those jobs are destroyed, right? You don't see domestic workers anymore. And if you do, they are very expensive, only for the wealthy. The very, very wealthy can afford somebody to come to your house and clean it and, maybe feed the children or babysit at your house. Now, I was fortunate that when I had my son, I hired a babysitter who did domesticated work. She would clean the house and feed the kid and do all that while I went to work. And, so I can relate to that, as a parent who went out to work, started businesses, going out there. I had to sacrifice to give my kid, a better life. Again, today, if I tried to hire that same person to do that work, what would the cost be? It would be, with today's employment laws and everything, it would be, forget it. There'd be no way, right? And so what happens is now parents have to make a choice. Do I put my kid in a factory? I just hate these daycares. Put them in a factory daycare? Or, do I just not go to work? And what's happening is the daycares are becoming so expensive that now we're having parents stay home, which is fine. And again, I want mothers to stay home with their kids and fathers to stay home with their kids if they can afford it. So anyway, I want to play a little bit more of this clip, and then I gotta, call it a night. But that's all interesting stuff. I absolutely enjoy the conversations that are being shared, and I appreciate that.
Rah, rah, rah. But that's not why I ran. That's not why I ran for Congress in the first place. I literally ran because I was mad at Republicans.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still mad at Republicans.
Yes.
Because it is affecting our children's lives and future. And it's our job to hold our elected leaders accountable. It's my job to hold my colleagues accountable. And if we don't fix these problems to the point where young people are turning to crazy socialists, it's going to get worse. It's literally going to get worse, and it'll be gone. I don't think we could ever get it back.
Or abroad, or their Iranian sleeper cells in the United States. It seems to me the real threat to the United States is the collapse of its cities, of its population centers, where most people live. I don't live in a city, don't want to live in a city, because they suck.
Yeah.
But in a normal country, I would live in a city, and so would you.
Sure.
Of course. So I don't understand how we spent the last 25 years fighting all these wars, excessively focused on our enemies abroad, jihadis, or whatever. They're telling us the threat is white supremacists under Biden. And the country has not gotten better.
No.
It's like maintaining the empire has destroyed the republic.
There you go. Tucker just said it. Maintaining the empire has destroyed the republic. Let me read that. No, my dad was born in Ukraine, immigrated to Germany with my mom, where I was born. My older brother, born before me, passed away at 11 months. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. From whooping cough. My back then, the children, my grandparents had a daughter that passed away almost right away, got sick and died. And back then that's the way it was. A lot of kids, they got sick, and we didn't know how to fight this stuff back then either. But so anyway, I wanted to get on and give those numbers. Now I hope everybody has a better perspective on the economy and what really is going on in the economy. And I hope I've given people something to think about when they turn on the news and see just the complete and utter BS that these news media stations are putting out there. So I want to remind people, please go to my YouTube and subscribe if you're not there at youtube.com/@broommedia. On YouTube, you're going to get the latest information, shows. So please go on there, check them out. And also, if you're not following me on X, please do that at x.com/broommedia. There you'll see other stuff other than my Facebook post. And look, I really want to thank everybody who, spent the time to come hang out with me. And, honestly, I could do another hour, but, I know I have to call my aunt after this, and she's going to keep me on the phone for who knows how long. So, I want to say God bless to everybody who's out there. Stand up for what you believe, and stand up for your family. Remember to protect your assets, because at any moment, things could go south. And so try not to depend on other people. I appreciate you, and I hope everybody has a great week. I'm going to have another video coming out on YouTube, hopefully by Wednesday. So keep an eye out for that. And everybody have a great night. So take care, and thank you very much.